Eliza Orzeszkowa, The Argonauts. Subscribe to be part of our reading community. Chapter 18. In this manner, they conversed some time longer of the Italian painters of the epoch preceding Raphael and of their modern followers, at times disputing slightly, at times growing enthusiastic in company, till they agreed in one opinion, namely that the greatest master of painting, whom it was impossible to compare with anyone among contemporaries, was Dante Gabriel Rossetti, an Englishman, but that the school of German Nazarenes to which Overbeck, Steinle, Furich, and others belonged, was, in spite of certain inequalities and weaknesses, altogether pure Quattrocento. Yes, Quattrocento, finished the Baron. Who knows even if they are not purer, more perfect Quattrocento than Rossetti and Morris? Krenitsky listened, spoke rarely, while something within him began to weep. He, too, loved art, but how far was he now from its loftiest caprices? How much would he give if those dear boys there, those noble hearts, would speak of something else to him, of something nearer? After a time he remarked with a smile, to which he brought himself with effort, "Then you have the first parts of that golden fleece which you are to bear beyond the sea?" "Ha!" laughed the Baron. "The golden fleece, splendidly said. In truth, we shear the sheep, or, if you like, the shepherds, for you cannot imagine what a rheumatism of thought in this matter prevails throughout the country. No man knows the value of what he has. No man knows what he possesses. There is no conception of art, no aesthetic knowledge. In my journey I felt as if wandering through ancient Scythia. All are related to me, or are old neighbors of my parents. They greeted me with open arms. Kisses with saliva and chops cooked in buckwheat grits. Their rooms are filled with progeny who look as though they might grow up without trousers. The parents we may almost call now the shirtless. From this cause comes a genuine fury of turning all things to money. My proposition brought to their eyes tears of gratitude. They saw in me a savior. Had I wished, I might have won the glory of a patriot bringing salvation to his countrymen. But glory is a painted pot. I am not a man to be covered with labels. I buy cheap to sell dear, that is my game. And, though I told them this, they kissed me. I filled their mouths, which were suffering from that hunger which goes before harvest. They opened old cupboards before me, also storehouses. One man even opened a chapel in which I found church cloths of incomparable antiquity. I suspect that one of these is of Flemish make and reaches back to Robert the Pious. Just such a one did I see in the museum at Cluny. Finally, a number of images, some girdles and brocades, some old weapons which would befit John of Dresden very well. This is my booty. Here we have discovered one Overbeck and one Steinle, but Marian, during my absence, found somewhere Saxon porcelain of incredible age in perfect preservation. But this is only the beginning. There will be a whole harvest of these things, a whole harvest. "A golden fleece," whispered Krenitsky. He grew more and more gloomy, and felt in his right side a pain which was well-nigh unendurable. The tone in which the Baron gave account of his journey in regions about his birthplace roused almost instinctive disgust in Krenitsky. He looked at Marian. Was he the same also? After a while he asked, "Has the American project crystallized thoroughly? Is it settled? Are you going to America surely?" "It has crystallized this far," answered Marian, "that I start no later than tomorrow. Emil will remain here some weeks yet. So I, to become acquainted with the people and the country, leave here tomorrow." Krenitsky straightened himself and sat there dumb for a time with fixed look. Then he repeated, "Tomorrow?" "Absolutely," confirmed Marian. And when the Baron sat down after long walking, he rose and began in turn to walk through the drawing-room, declaring that he had come today purposely to take farewell of Krenitsky. "I could not go without taking farewell of my good old man," said he. It may be that he would not have gone so soon had not certain details made his life impossible. One of these details was that the week before his father had withdrawn the allowance paid up to that time. A certain period had ended just a week earlier, and through commands from above, the Treasury had withheld payment. In speaking of this, Marian grew red in the face. The vein in his forehead swelled like a blue cord. His eyes glittered brightly. He was wounded to his innermost heart by the last conversation which he had had with his father. It was brief but decisive. He had told it to Krenitsky. From the narrative, it was possible to divine that Darvid had shown at first an inclination to milden the demands on his son, but afterward despotic habits and practical views had won the victory. He demanded that in one of the factories belonging to him, Marion should begin a course of self-restraint, obedience, and labor. "Our two individualities," said Marion, "came into collision and sprang back in a state of complete inviolability. Not the least dint was made on or on me. Our wills remained unbroken. He, of course, is a man with a mighty will. It seemed at first that the death of that poor little Kara crushed him, but he straightened quickly, and now again he is going through genuine orgies of his iron labor. I admire that integrity of will in him, and I confess that it is a power of the highest quality. But I have no thought of abdicating my own personality, because my father, with all his undoubted endowments, has a head badly ventilated. It may be that one of my great-grandfathers said that if one child gave itself as food to worms, another should give itself to be crushed by its father's chariot. But I am not my own great-grandfather, and I know that every yielding of one's self to be tormented by Pavel to amuse Gavel is a painted pot." "It is a darned sock," added the Baron. Another reason why Marion had to leave the city without delay was the impression produced on him by the death of that poor little girl. But he did not admit that so many atavistic instincts were at work in him. He was a man of the new style, but he experienced now the spiritual condition of his great-grandfather, which affected him so that, like Maeterlinck's Hjalmar, he wished to throw handfuls of earth at night owls. The death of that little one, and all that was happening and going on in the house, had made his soul pale from weakness. He understood now Maeterlinck's expression, to sink to the very eyelids in sorrow. When that intruder, who is ever mowing grass beneath life's windows, came for that little girl, Marion had the question in mind continually, "Why do the lamps go out?" Now, like Hjalmar in Princess Melania, he feels every moment like exclaiming, "Someone is weeping here near us." He had moments in which such nervous impotence attacked him that he did not feel capable of stirring a finger or moving an eyelid. Accompanying this condition was a perfect understanding that all sentimental family tenderness is a painted pot. It is known, of course, that in the world a multitude of maidens are always dying, that each life is a gate before which grave-diggers are waiting, and that this does not furnish the slightest reason why those under whose window the intruder has not begun to mow grass yet should have pale and sickly souls. He must flee from expiring lamps and night owls, from nervous impotence and spleen of spirit. He must rush out for new contacts and horizons, for new spaces where there are fresh worlds which are free from the 50 defilements of past centuries. He concluded and took a seat. Krenitsky had tears in his eyes, and after a rather long silence, he added, "Thou art going away, I see." And then, with hesitating voice, he inquired, "Thou hast said, that which is happening and going on in the house, what is going on there?" To this the Baron answered, with growing blushes, "How? Do you not know that Pani Darvid and Panna Irene set out in a few days for a retreat?" "To Krinichna," said Marianne, completing the information. "Father has made Irene the owner of Krinichna, and they are going there." Krenitsky grew very pale, and only after great red spots had appeared above his eyes did he look at the Baron and begin. Then, added the Baron, quickly, "everything is ended between Panna Irene and me. I am glad, for how could my bite and her Edel agree? That would have been like the odor of ether on a sunny day in Maeterlinck's hothouses. Naturally, I represent the ether, and Panna Irene the sunny day." The smile with which he said this grew ever more jeering and malicious. "But I know not how they will succeed in the retreat. In spite of her idol, Panna Irene has much in her, very much of the cry of life, of that beautiful impulse toward what Rusbrook called love in action, toward ecstatic impressions, and with such a disposition, as far as my skill extends in this matter, it is difficult to halt at the mere spectacle of sparrows making love outside one's window." "A truce to malicious phrases, Emile," interrupted Marion. "Thou art not threatened with the fate of Werther because my sister has broken with thee." "Of course not," laughed the Baron. And Marion added quickly, "And thou shouldst even offer up to her that painted pot, called gratitude, because she has not closed to thee the road to some daughter of a multi-millionaire Yankee. America possesses men of iron toil, whose daughters are far richer than the daughters, alas, than the only daughter of my father. Perhaps, agreed the Baron. The daughters of the richest American fathers pay very high prices for European titles. In this way, or another, or both together, I may make a colossal fortune. Yes, wealth is a door before which the heralds of life have their station. I am not a man pasted over with labels. I confess that this perspective entices me. What I possess now is merely a little crumb for my hunger of life. I shall leave here greedy for new sensations and new profits, eager for love in action and for gain. After a moment's silence, Kranitsky whispered, "They are going." "They are going," then glancing along the faces of the two young men, he added, "You are going?" "Yes," said the Baron, "and therefore we make a certain proposition. Perhaps you would take upon yourself to be one of our agents." He presented in detail a plan of the enterprise. To carry out this, there would be agents disposed through the whole country to discover and purchase. We need aesthetic persons, a company of developed men, and it is difficult, very difficult, to find them. In this country, sterility reigns throughout the whole region of gray matter in the brain. It is sterility in the great gray substance, if you wish. Kranitsky was silent. It was not long since he had desired this position, perhaps, and something which might attach him to people and to life. But now, during this discourse with his two friends, an increasing disgust had seized hold of him. The sarcasm of the Baron about shirtless parents who kissed him with lips suffering from hunger before harvest pierced his heart cruelly. In his mind hovered the words departure, death, and before his imagination rose the vision of a flock of birds flying in every direction. To buy cheap, to sell dear, that was vile. At the same time he felt that the pains in his side and his heart had grown keener, and a feeling of faintness possessed him. After a moment's thought, he said, "No, my dear friends, it seems that I shall not be able to serve you. I am sick, I am growing old. Besides, my dears, I must tell you openly." He hesitated, and took from the table his gold case, which he had opened before the guests. He meditated a moment, and then said, "Your undertaking has sides which wound my sense of propriety somewhat. This business will always be buying in a temple, even in temples, I might say, for art is sacred, and so is the fatherland. You are both too clever to require explanation on this point. The loneliness in which I shall be when you are gone frightens and pains me immensely, but I am forced to say that I shall not be with you in this matter. No, decidedly, I shall not be of your company." By nature, Kranitsky was averse to disputes, and for various reasons unused to them. Hence he had begun to speak with hesitation and dislike. But afterward he rested his shoulder against the arm of the sofa, and with head somewhat raised, twirling the cigarette case in his hand, he had the look of a great lord, especially if compared with the Baron, who always seemed somewhat like a mosquito preparing to bite. And this time he began with a sneering smile. "You are always painted in the color of romantic poetry of sacred memory. While you were speaking, I seemed to be listening to a postilion playing under the windows of incurable patients, and—" But Marion rose from his armchair and broke in. "As for me, I respect individuality, and since that of our beloved Pan Arthur is developed in his way, we have no right to insist on attacking him with ridicule. To be ridiculous proves nothing. Thou art ridiculous is no argument. I may be ridiculous in the eyes of another man, though right in my own. But a truce to discussion. I remind thee, Emile, of our porcelain." "Yes, yes," replied the Baron, and he rose also. "We must take farewell of our beloved friend here." At that moment, through the open door of the sleeping-room, entered Mother Clemens with a great tray. Since she had gratified her favorite, she wished to do it in the best manner possible. On her head was a cap as white as snow. The clattering overshoes were no longer on her feet, and a checkered kerchief was arranged neatly, even with elegance, across her bosom. On the tray were small glasses, a bottle of liqueur, a pate de foie gras, and 3 cups from which rose the excellent odor of coffee. All this she placed on a table before the sofa, and left the little drawing-room with gloomy eye but firm foot. Kranitsky sprang up from the sofa. "My dearest friends, I beg you, take a glass of liqueur, that which thou lovest, Baron, Marion, a little of the pate de foie gras." But they touched their watches simultaneously. "No, no," began the Baron, refusing, We have only 3 minutes left. We lunched at Borel's, who, as my father says, gives us Lucullus feasts. Kranitsky did not cease to urge them. Certain habits or instincts of a noble brightened his eyes and shaped his arms in gestures of entreaty, but they resisted. In 5 minutes they must be in that apparently wretched antiquarian shop, where Marian had discovered the amazing porcelain. The Baron, giving his hand to Kranitsky in parting, said, "We shall see each other again. You will visit me. I do not leave for a number of weeks. I doubt if this porcelain comes from Meissen, as Marian insists. In what year was the factory in Meissen?" "In 1709, answered Marian, and to Kranitsky he said, "Adieu, my good friend, adieu. Be well, and write to me sometimes. Thou wilt find the address with Immel." He turned to the door. Kranitsky held him by the hand, however, and looked into his face with eyes which were mist-covered. "Then it has come to this. For long years, it may be forever." "Well, well, see thou art growing tender," began Marian, but he stopped, and over his rosy face passed something like a shade of feeling. "Well, my old man, embrace me." And when Kranitsky had held him long in his arms, he said, La, leave regrets. Some ancient poet has told us that man is a shadow that is dreaming of shadows. We have been dreaming, my good friend. The only cure is to jest at everything, come what may." With these words, Marian went to the anteroom and put on his overcoat. Meanwhile, the Baron said, "That cannot have come from Meissen, nor be of the year 1709. That is much more recent. It comes from the Ilmenau factory." "How so? Say rather that it comes from Frankenthal?" The Baron, looking around from behind his cane, remarked, "It is too smooth and shining for such an old date." Marian answered, with his hand on the lock, "It is polished with agate," and he went out. But the Baron, after crossing the threshold, began, "And as to the ruddy brownish biscuit—" The door closed, the voices ceased. Kranitsky stood some time in the antechamber, then he turned toward the little drawing-room and whispered, "Polished with agate! Biscuit! And those are their last words." Some minutes later, in a Turkish dressing-gown with patched lining and mended sleeves, Kranitsky lay on his long chair opposite his collection of pipes, and in deep thought twirled his golden cigarette case. In vain did Mother Clemens urge him to eat a little of that Arabian pate and drink a glass of liqueur. He tried, but could swallow nothing. Sorrow had closed his throat. He was sunk in reminiscences. He felt with perfect tangibleness that breath of cold air which was blowing around him. In this manner did time blow on the man, Time, that merciless jester who had always circled about playing various pranks on him. But Kranitsky had never looked into the face of that jester with attention. Occasionally, sorrow and grief had come to him in company with the trickster, but they were transient, not of the kind which go into the depth of the heart, but such as slip along over the surface. He grew gloomy, was sorry for having lost someone or having missed something, and passed on with springy, lightly swaying gait, with his long-continued youth humming some fashionable ditty, or, with tender smile on his lips, living easily and joyously in endless pursuit of agreeable trifles. But now he has the first look at time, face to face and nearby. The current has borne away, the abyss has swallowed, people, houses, relations, feelings, and nothing comes back from them but one word in a ceaseless murmur, gone, gone, gone. That which is ended today calls to the man's mind all things that have been. That past is to him something in the form of a mighty grave, or rather a catacomb, composed of a host of graves, through the openings of which are visible the absent, not only those snatched away by death, but also those gone through separation, removal, oblivion. Dead were faces once dear, faded were moments once precious, portions of life had dropped into dust, and time, standing before the catacomb, his cheeks swollen and jeering, puffs his cold breath of the grave on that man who is calling up the past. Kranitsky wrapped himself closely in his dressing-gown, hung his head so low that the bald spot, whitening on his crown, became visible. His lower lip dropped. Red furrows came out above his black brow. Mother Clemens stood in the kitchen doorway. "Wilt thou eat dinner now?" inquired she. He made no answer. She withdrew, but returned in half an hour bringing a cup of black coffee. "Drink," said she. "Perhaps thou wilt grow cheerful, and I will tell the news from Lipovka." She pushed a small table to the long chair, sat down with hands on her knees, and with immense attention in the expression of her quick and shining eyes, fell to repeating the substance of a letter just received from her godson, the tenant of Lipovka. He wrote that he had repaired the dwelling, that he was living himself in a building outside, that he had put the place in order most neatly, as if for the arrival of the owner. The furniture was the same as in the time of the former master. Though old, it was sound yet, and beautiful, because repaired and cleaned. The garden was larger than of old, for many fruit trees had been added. The bees, brought in recently, were thriving. It was quiet there, calm, green in summer, white in winter, not as in that cursed city of throngs and shouting, she laughed. And there is no Barrack Schildman there. Then she added, Be at rest about debts. Thou wilt sell thy pipes and cupids, and if they do not bring enough, I will give all my own things. All that I have I will give, and I will drag thee out of this hell. O Arabian adventure! If this lasts longer, thou wilt lose the last of thy health. Thou wilt go deeper in debt, and die in a hospital. Tulek, dost thou hear what I say? Why not answer? And since he made no answer even then, she continued, But rememberest thou that Lipovka grove beyond the yard? It is there yet. Stefan has not cut it down, God forbid. And dost thou remember how beautifully the sun sets behind that grove? When the sun had gone down in the world, it began to grow dark in Kernitsky's room, and Mother Clemens continued in the thickening twilight. And rememberest thou how quiet the evenings are there? In summer, the nightingales sing. In autumn, the bagpipes play. In winter, God's winds rush outside the wall and roar. But inside, it is honest and quiet and safe. Remember to subscribe.